in the chat box, and there'll be a separate link with the opportunity to ask questions at the end. So we'll have a discussion of 50 minutes to an hour. Yeah, feel free to put things in the chat box, and I think we're good to kick off. So
thanks for the invite, Cassidy.
Say again, sorry, Graham.
Thanks for the invite.
No, you're absolutely welcome. Pleasure to have you, Graham. And perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself for those that don't know you.
Yeah, my name's Graham. I work with Atlas by Codex Edge. So we're the market leading mapping platform for the UK and Wales Law Society and yeah, a database really for law firms. So we cross-reference and map all lawyers that are in the England and Wales qualified with exact specialism. So we code every lawyer and then we track all the lawyers that move between different firms, and that's something that we're going to touch on today. The amount of movement that's still taking place in the market over the last 3 years. 10% of the market has moved across the UK. So yeah, we'll take a look today at some of the key trends and key firms that are losing, that are recruiting, and reasons why these firms are growing.
Oh, fantastic! No, looking forward to that, Graham. And Declan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Cassidy. So hi everyone, my name is Declan and I manage the legal desk here at Broadgate. So I work in Ireland exclusively, so work alongside Cassidy and would work across the practice. So recruit across the kind of Indigenous Irish firms, both kind of general practice up to mid-tier, up to the kind of top 6 Irish practices. And then with the new market entrants that have come in, both UK and global law firms that have kind of shaped up the double market, which we'll get onto obviously in a moment. So recruit across practice within all those different types of firms. And then I also work on the in-house side, so keeping busy, and we work across in-house with asset managers, fund managers, insurance-based companies, consultancies, pharma, life sciences, IT, tech, fintech. So you name it, we've kind of worked on it. So it's a very busy market, but really good to kind of speak with you, Graham. I think just to kind of even give us a bit of an understanding, and hopefully the participants today, just in what the trends are, because as obviously we'll touch on, I think obviously being a recruiter, Cassidy, I'm sure you'll agree, we get asked so many questions every day, like what is happening in the legal market? That's the golden question. And it's kind of like, how long do you have? It's just so much. So it's great to probably see what the key trends are. So then lawyers can maybe make, kind of the right decisions for them on their career based on what they're looking for. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, what we're seeing, sorry, Cassie, I mean, what we're seeing is still a lot of movement across the different markets, and recruiters and law firms having to really delve even deeper and probably dig even deeper into firms and trying to find lawyers that are maybe motivated to move. And obviously as recruiters, I mean, we're not recruiters. Our background is legal recruitment, but we just provide mapping software and data really that enables recruiters and law firms to find more candidates really. So, I mean, some of the areas that we're seeing a lot of movement, there is a lot of movement from in-house back into private practice. And I think it's well documented that the amount that lawyers can now earn has increased if they move back away from in-house. I think previously, before COVID, in-house was offered potentially a better work-life balance. I think obviously lawyers go in-house for a number of different reasons, and I think that there's a broader range of skills and attributes that you would need to work in-house. But we're seeing a lot moving back there, and that's something that the recruiters are using Atlas for to find. We're seeing a lot of city firms, they're recruiting from outside the typical city. So just looking at some of the Atlas data this afternoon, and lawyers that have moved to Manchester from Leeds, from Chester, from Altrincham, and further afield as well. So the bigger salaries, and I'm speaking with a recruiter about 2 weeks ago, he was saying that he was about to place somebody at a firm in Chester. But then DLA Piper made an offer that was 35k more, and this was a three PQE lawyer who was described as good, but not amazing. But he can get that big uplift, and only needs to be in the office 2 days a week. Chester to Manchester isn't much of a commute in, so that's a big thing as well. So I think and Cardiff lawyers moving to Bristol is something that's been documented by a couple of our clients, one being Chadwick Knott, who we work and have worked with for many years. So there's lots happening there. Alternative law firms continue to grow, and we produced a report recently which looked at those firms, and again, if a lawyer has a following, or even maybe doesn't need to have a following, and joins firms like Setfords and Taylor Rhodes, where they have a hybrid of consultancy and also traditional lawyers. That's proven to be a big area as well. Non-practicing lawyers, we're seeing more non-practicing lawyers coming back to the law, and that's something that the recruiters are really looking at. And it's not the traditional non-practicing of 40 plus PQE. It's those that are low to mid-level that maybe took time out during COVID for just to maternity leave or paternity leave, or we see some that have launched tech businesses. We see others that have gone on to be university lecturers, and now with the energy crisis and inflation and everything else, that lawyers are maybe looking at that now's a good time to to come back into the law. So I mean, those are four of the big areas. I mean, there's many others. Should I carry on, Cassidy? You want me to carry on?
Just curious on the non-practicing lawyer piece. Because we get approached by a lot of people that are non-practicing and looking to move back into the market. Are there any themes you're seeing of where the non-practicing lawyers are finding a home?
Are finding homes? Well, I mean, in terms of areas, there's a lot of sort of commercial contracts seems to be quite a big area. Litigation as well is big. Employment, you see non-practicing employment lawyers coming back to the law. I think restructuring and refinancing is becoming a bigger area as well. But you also see, lawyers that have maybe retired coming back and taking on locum roles. There's, there's so much activity, and the beauty of what we provide and other people provide as well, similar services, is that you can see these trends, and we can spot on Atlas what these trends are. So we can look at all the moves that have happened in the last 3 or 4 months and see who's losing, who's recruiting, and that enables recruiters and also law firms to take a look at maybe alternative pools of candidates.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to say, because I mean, certainly we concur around that interim piece. There's definitely a large expansion around the interim market, in both practice and in-house, and not just at the senior level, which historically has seemed to be where the interim market is, but also at more junior levels, at NQ levels. So I think that will continue for the future. And you mentioned, actually, Declan, I'll just ask you, I mean, from what Graham said about the UK, I mean, does that tie in with what you're seeing in Ireland?
Yeah, definitely on the kind of going back into practice. I've seen a couple of lawyers, as you say, Graham, have maybe gone into like education, or even I think after COVID, a lot of lawyers and even just kind of professionals in any market have kind of been awakened as to maybe there's a bit more to life than work. So maybe after COVID, for the last 6 months or the last year, they've gone and done diplomas, or they've studied, or they've traveled, or they've done something they've always wanted to do. So I've dealt with a number of candidates recently. I was only speaking to a candidate yesterday who was 7 years PQE, top tier Irish firm, worked in a global law firm, and after COVID was like, I'm just going to travel South America, which is just incredible. So I'm coming back into the market. And then I was equally just placed a lawyer actually who was it was a really lovely story. She kind of just worked for a top tier firm, trained at a top tier Irish firm, and then just kind of life, she just had children and just couldn't, unfortunately, kind of balance the kind of practice, I suppose, hours that's demanded sometimes, and kind of raising a family. So now all of her children are at university and she wants to get back into the law, so recently was able to get a role back into a top practice. So we had a lot of stories like that of people coming back into practice in Ireland as well, Graham. So it's definitely a similar theme, and again, similar practice areas, very on the litigious side, employment and kind of corporate commercial. They always kind of tend to be quite busy. So similar themes in Ireland as well, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, what else as well we're seeing is lawyers that maybe NQ to 2 PQE. I mean, they traditionally, they joined during COVID and maybe have never actually been into an office. So the call into an office 5 days a week is something that doesn't sit comfortably with some lawyers. There's also some 1, 2 PQE lawyers that have maybe begun to specialize in an area that they're not particularly happy with, and had 4 seats previously and maybe focused on family law, whereas employment or restructuring might be more beneficial for what they want to do. So we're seeing movement there, and that's for the recruiters and for the lawyers that are listening and watching as well. If you are in the wrong seat and you're not happy, now is a great time to look at what you really like to be doing.
I don't think that's important as well, because when I speak to candidates, and maybe there's qualified in during COVID, and they kind of took any job that they could because they were just happy to have a job upon qualification in the middle of a pandemic. So I've spoken to a lot of lawyers as well, kind of at the NQ to kind of even up to 2-year PQE, who they've tried it, they enjoy the firm, they enjoy the team, but it's just the day-to-day work is just not interest to them. So, and I think that boils down to a point that we're always talking about, Cassidy, like firms are always looking for lawyers to actually have a genuine vested interest in the practice area that they want, and that really shines through at an interview. I've had candidates who are kind of technically gifted, first-class honours, kind of amazing on paper, and then they just kind of do the interview, and the partners can tell, you're dealing with people who are like 20-30 years PQE who love their subject area, they're experts, they're kind of SMEs in their field, quizzing them not even on the technicalities but just more about like why they're interested, like what further reading have they done, what can they kind of tell about recent regulations or laws that have come in within that practice area. And if the candidate is sitting there and they don't know anything, that's a big red flag. So I'm always kind of telling candidates to do kind of further reading on the practice area and really show like why they're interested in that particular niche or why that specialism. And just to echo what you said, Graham, if there is any candidates that are out there who are at that kind of junior PQE stage or even senior PQE and who just feel a bit, I suppose, desensitized to what they're doing, because I think another thing as well, on the NQ side, definitely people who maybe qualified into practice that they didn't enjoy, or they just took a job because they needed a job. Whereas on the senior end, maybe there's someone who's done 5-6 years and they're just kind of a little bit stuck in a rut, bit monotonous. They've done the same type of work and they love law and they enjoy being a lawyer and they like that kind of big law culture, but they're just not interested in the practice area. It's definitely kind of time to kind of consider a move, consider options, because I think it's better to kind of do that at a junior PQE where, because as you get more senior, obviously become more niche and more specialized, it'll be harder for you to take a move. And then as well, the more senior you get, the more kind of salary you have. So therefore the dip in salary is going to be a lot higher. If you want to move practice area usually. So definitely seeing similar trends on kind of both kind of levels of PQE.
Yeah, and I think now's a good time to be looking as a lawyer at the different opportunities. Law firms are still growing, they're still recruiting. We work with a lawyer and they're put together a culture index within law firms, and it's becoming a massive thing as well. And a lot of law firms are looking at whether we're going to go fully working from home or whether we're doing hybrid or back in the office. And Stevenson Harwood came out saying, well, if you want to work from home, you're going to earn 20% less and things like that. I think that now there's probably never been a better time to look at your opportunities as a lawyer and see which firms are recruiting, who's growing. There's a lot of merger and acquisition activity happening at the moment as well, and that all feeds into the recruitment piece. So it's an exciting sector to be in.
Yeah, definitely.
Just going back on some of the points you touched upon, are there particular areas where you feel lawyers are keener to move in, particularly those perhaps at the NQ stage, they've done their seats and they're looking for their next position?
Yeah, I mean, well, we can see the specialism. We had a look earlier at the last 3 months and who's moving at sort of lower PQE levels, and the top 10. Commercial property is the biggest at the moment. Commercial litigation is huge. Corporate M&A, residential property coming in fourth, and hopefully that will continue because I think the residential property market drives a lot of the UK and Irish economy. Yeah. Personal tax, trust and probate, and then sort of family, corporate finance, banking. They're the key areas where lower PQE lawyers are tending to move. I don't know if you see the same in Ireland, Declan.
Yeah, definitely. Commercial litigation, 100%, kind of definitely on debt recovery and solvency focus, corporate as well, not just on the kind of M&A side, but also on the kind of advisory side, definitely. And then commercial IT is always big in Dublin, so there's always a need for kind of NQs right up to senior PQE. But yeah, definitely echo, and actually real estate and commercial property as well. I've had a number of NQ rules up to kind of 2-year PQE, so similar actually. It's quite funny, similar trend.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'll add it to sort of from a London, perhaps regional perspective. I'm seeing a lot of demand around that commercial and corporate piece. And I think partly candidates are looking at that area because they see it as a route to going in-house in the future, potentially. So that certainly seems to be an area of demand. And again, I'm going to ask you both around seniority within the marketplace as it stands. I mean, where is the demand for lawyers in terms of PQE in your views? Is it mid, senior, all levels? What's your general view?
Do you want me to go first?
I know you want to take that.
Yeah, fire away, Declan.
So yeah, I mean, busy across all areas, to be honest. But main trends, I would say, well, in Dublin, it's coming up to kind of NQ season. So a lot of the NQs are kind of getting admitted either in January or in April of next year. So we're starting to see a build up again of kind of firms kind of reaching out to me and kind of saying, look, we're maybe looking for NQs in these areas. If you have anyone who's open to a change, let us know. And the NQs that are moving are usually moving from kind of mid-tier to the internationals or mid-tier to the top tier. And it's usually financially motivated, but it's also kind of motivated as well by just because those teams, they have bigger teams. So therefore there's more of a chance for them to actually get a role. Whereas obviously if you're competing with 4 other people in a similar seat and, unfortunately, if you don't get that seat, then there's a less chance for you to get that, obviously, that kind of role. So definitely on the NQ side and across the board, but I would definitely say in corporate kind of banking and funds is a really big one at the moment for NQs in Dublin. And again, on the kind of more property and real estate side. And then senior PQE, we're kind of seeing a big kind of increase in people definitely within corporate banking in particular, but also on the commercial litigation front across all specialisms. So again, insolvency, debt recovery, financial kind of, litigation, banking litigation, FinReg, as well. Tax is a big one at the moment on the more senior side, and we're definitely seeing a lot more kind of rules across different practices, again on the mid-tier Irish firms and the internationals on the tax side. And then on the international side, as businesses and the new market entrants are coming in, they're always happy to kind of see someone who's maybe at that senior associate level, either within corporate banking or commercial IT. If they can bring obviously business with them, they can bring junior kind of associates with them as well. Some of the internationals are always happy to have a conversation with those types of lawyers. So keeping kind of busy across all main practice areas, but those would be the main themes at the moment. But again, as we know, it could change next week. So it's just, it's crazy at the moment, but yeah.
I think just touching on that, it's probably good to look at, over the last 3 months, who the big recruiters have been and who's really ramping up their teams. Owen Mitchell have been very active in the last 3 months. Freets, Trowers and Hamlins, CMS and Mishcon de Rea have been the big 5 recruiters, and that seems to be across the board and touching on a lot of the practice areas and specialisms we've mentioned, but recruiting, from NQ up to partner as well. And certainly Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, there's a lot of activity and a lot of partner moves there as well. And a lot of acquisitive law firms who are keen to grow and pick up the good talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Graham, from what you've seen, I guess nationally, has it been consistently the same firms that have been growing, or has it been ebbing and flowing over the last few months from what you see?
Yeah, it's again looking at different practice areas, it kind of varies, but yeah, those that I mentioned have certainly been growing quite a bit. Shakespeare Martineau as well seem to be picking up a lot, and speaking with them, they're reaching the quotas or the numbers of lawyers that we're looking for, but are still looking to grow as well. Trowers and Hamlins, we've talked about. Pennington's as well, another one that are growing. The family law side seems to be growing a lot as well. Firms like Stowe Family Law seem to be growing massively and looking at opening new offices and continually looking to grow and using the software we provide to work out where all the family lawyers are located. And if there is an area where there are a lot of family lawyers who are maybe commuting into a bigger city, maybe look at opening up an office in a smaller, more regional town. So yeah, there is so much activity, and obviously the people are talking about the economy and the dreaded R word and things like that. But we've not seen it yet. But there is certainly a move towards restructuring and insolvency lawyers and recruiting. But you mentioned tax and you mentioned share schemes and incentives, and they're big areas as well. So there's lots happening.
Yeah. Again, that ties in, I guess, my experience. Certainly, again, looking at the regions in the UK and in London, which has been my focus at sort of the mid-senior level. Still a lot of movement, a real shortage of corporate M&A lawyers, a distinct shortage within the area of tax and employee share schemes. We've seen a notable uptick going on what you're saying, Graham, within commercial litigation, which is interesting, and also employment. Funds has been incredibly busy, as is banking and the whole sort of private equity and venture capital piece. And then finally, I think we've seen quite a lot of movement around financial services regulation and fintech, which obviously we've got a huge hub for fintech in the UK. So it needs to be interesting that month for month we're still getting busier despite the news that we're seeing. So it'll be interesting to see whether we see a slowdown or that continues. But I think because of the diversification of the UK, with international exposure from a legal perspective, touch wood, things still look like they're in very good shape.
Yeah, well, I think law firms are always going to be growing, aren't they? I think even in difficult times, there's still going to be requirements for, unfortunately, things like insolvency and restructuring. But yeah, I mean, pensions is always a tough area to find good lawyers in as well. And if you're qualified in that particular specialism, then you're in a good position. I mean, we're also seeing as well the number of increase in relocators, and that's kind of across private practice and in-house as well. So there are a number of roles within London, in-house roles in London, that have been filled by lawyers based in the regions, based in Manchester, based in Newcastle and Leeds, but without the remit to come into the office, maybe coming one day a month. So, in-house firms in London are looking outside of London to try and find the right lawyers.
Yeah.
And then also regional firms are looking at lawyers who maybe been in London and maybe have a young family, but went to school in Durham or studied law in Bristol or Durham or Newcastle and want to return to their roots. So, and again, we do help law firms by being able to show schools and universities that lawyers attended, so they can then maybe look for relocators if they're really struggling to fill a role.
Yeah, again, really good point. I mean, we spend a lot of our time looking for relocators, particularly in regional work, if people have studied in Southampton University previously or Manchester, whatever, and trying to pull them out of possibly the London locations and other places across South East. So I think that is a really good pool of talent. And Declan, you've probably got some interesting perspective of that in terms of people moving from Ireland and elsewhere.
Just to echo what you were going to say there, Cassidy, kind of seeing a lot of people like leaving within the corporate space, just corporate and banking lawyers at the moment. There's none in Dublin. It's just, they're like the golden unicorn. I'm having the same conversation with all the HR managers, all the partners. They're like, any banking, any corporate? Not yet. Okay. It's just seems to be like gold dust at the moment. I think the reason is they are moving across the water to London, but not just London. Like before COVID, it would have been very London centric. Yeah, I'm going to go to London. I'm obviously going to, go. It's usually financially motivated. Sometimes obviously people kind of want to better their career because, 9 times out of 10, if it's a big kind of US law firm, especially, or a Magic Circle, Silver Circle, the size and scale of the transactions are going to be slightly higher. And also the top 6 or the top Irish firms, they would sometimes be the Irish counsel on those transactions if there was an Irish element to it. So lawyers have exposure to those types of transactions and deals here back home. So they think, well, if I've had exposure to it, I actually enjoy it. I'm definitely going to kind of utilize that and try and get an increase on my salary, sometimes 25%, even 50%. Speaking to kind of candidates, and if they're kind of around that kind of, 3 to 5 year PQE, let's just say they're corporate, they're going to be on about kind of 85 to the 6 figures, up to 100, maybe 110 at a push at a 5 year PQE. I mean, in London, it's different, as you know, and the price for rent in Dublin is probably higher than London, so it actually makes more sense. So, but not just London. Like even before the pandemic, it would have been very like, I'm going to go to London because the qualification it's quite easy for an Irish lawyer to get qualified in England. It's more just a kind of practicing cert. There's no real kind of additional accreditations required, which lawyers are obviously happy to hear when they've spent years and years and years to kind of qualify, and a lot of time and investment's gone into that. But after the pandemic, speaking to candidates who are looking to go further afield, just get me anywhere. I think kind of the Irish weather is probably an element to that as well. They kind of want to go to Dubai, Singapore, Sydney, and as well. There's always been a long-standing history of kind of America with the US, with Ireland as well. But obviously, the kind of route to qualification in the US is a lot harder. You have to sit the New York bar, which is quite a grueling task. So I think a lot of lawyers are moving to Dubai, Australia, and it's usually within kind of corporate, real estate, projects, and banking. There'd be the kind of the core areas if kind of lawyers are looking to make a move within those practice areas. But yeah, as well, there's been a big shift of lawyers making the move down after COVID from Northern Ireland to the south. I'm obviously kind of being from the north myself, made the move down to Dublin. It's easy, but before the pandemic, I would have spoken. I've helped lawyers kind of make that transition down, but they actually physically had to relocate and kind of up sticks and move down to Dublin. Whereas now some of the firms, if they're a senior PQE, like I placed a lawyer a few months ago, and they're based in Belfast, but they travel down to Dublin 2 days a week, and they're on a lot higher on the salary than they would be because the tax implications, there's ways to work around that. So especially as well, if maybe the practice has an office in Belfast and also an office in Dublin. So there's a lot more of that hybrid working piece from the north to the south of Ireland is definitely helping and benefiting lawyers making that transition without having to up sticks and relocate yourself and your family, which is obviously an added bonus. So yeah, a lot of agile movement going on in the market here as well. For sure.
And it's quite interesting because I know many of the lawyers you've referred to me from Dublin have been corporate lawyers, but I would say the highest percentage of them have wanted to work for American law firms.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't I like sometimes I've got a few friends that have made the move, and do you know what? Like it's brilliant for their CV. Like it's fantastic, and a lot of them actually do love the work. They love the buzz. Like if they've no dependents, they're earning a lot of money. The exposure that they're getting. Sometimes, of course, the hours are grueling, but that is the legal sector. A lot of people are aware of that before they get into the profession. So I think you are remunerated quite well. But at the same time, it is more about kind of having that exposure. I think if you are kind of looking to make that move, definitely kind of speak to myself and Cassidy, because again, between us, I've kind of helped lawyers make that move. And I think the US firms, once you kind of work for a US firm, there's no higher really in your career and practice. Like once you've worked for, one of the big kind of Jones Day, Kirkland Ellis, you can't go higher. So really then you have the choice of the market if you want to move in-house or if you want to make a move back home. And, sometimes if I have a relocator who's maybe worked for like a Magic Circle or definitely a US law firm, it's exciting because all the firms that want to at least have a conversation with them, even if they don't have a live role at that level of PQE, they're happy enough. The partners are more than happy to have a coffee with them and chat to them about even future plans, to join the practice. So you've got a choice of the market if you have a couple of years on your CV with those types of firms. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people are moving to the big US firms, and I think maybe it's with hybrid working as well. Like you don't like one of my best friends, she's just moved to a US law firm and she loves going into the office, but she doesn't have to go in every day. So instead of having to sit physically at your desk until 4 a.m. in the morning, she can sit at her desk at home and then she can go to bed and make her dinner at home. So having that kind of hybrid and flexibility from like a personal perspective, you don't have to physically get up, get a shower, go into the office and, use the sleeping pods or whatever. Like you can actually go home and have your dinner at home, log in and log on to calls from your kitchen table or from your desk. So in your study at home. So that has definitely helped, and it's made it less kind of physically demanding and grueling on someone as well, I think. So that's definitely a beneficial aspect to COVID for sure.
It's interesting. Over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've had a number of candidates from US law firms who are looking to get out of that structure because the intensity doing well over 2,000 hours has been too much for them. They've actually said, "I'll take £100,000 pay cut to move." So I think there is sort of it's a Marmite option, isn't it? It seems to be for candidates. But I was going to add, I was speaking to a tax lawyer in the regions on upper six-figure 100,000+ salary, and by moving to an American law firm, they got a guaranteed extra £100,000 basic plus a guaranteed £100,000 bonus. So they more their salary by making the move. Wow. So you can see why people are tempted to make that jump.
Yeah. I think it's different strokes, different folks like it, and that's why it is so like busy at the moment, because so many different variables when anyone's looking to move. But in the legal sector, because it's so much is happening, and because I think you've got certain tiers of firm that can offer you certain things, whether it's salary, whether it's career progression, whether it's work-life balance, whether it's a mix of all three, and everyone has their own kind of drive and force, and everyone at certain levels of their life as well. Like I've spoke to a really impressive lawyer 2 weeks ago, and she trained in a Magic Circle in London. She's from Dublin, trained in Magic Circle in London, went back to Dublin, and then funnily enough was like, the work here isn't the best. I'm actually going to go back and work for a US firm and just kind of really slog myself. And then she's like, no, I'm ready now to come home. Like I've done it. So different times of your life, you're going to be ready, but it's definitely good to kind of keep options open, because as you said, there's so much going on at the moment. It's the busiest it's been. So it's definitely a good time to consider your options and have a conversation about it anyway.
Cassidy, do you see much movement in sort of 2 to 4 PQE on the back of the NQs earning nearly what they're earning, and having spent 2, 3, 4 years with a firm, and somebody comes in admittedly well qualified and well trained, but earning nearly what they're earning as an NQ?
Yeah, great question, Graham. I tend to do the mid to senior level, but I think there's a real pinch from where the NQs, obviously, they've seen proportionately much higher pay rises, haven't they, than their peers that are perhaps 3-4 year PQE upwards. So we've absolutely seen that a desire to move purely for a pay rise for people at 4, 5, 6 years PQE. So we have placed a number of people on that basis. But again, what we have seen, and the conversation I would typically have with someone who's looking to move on that basis is have a conversation with your existing employer, because many law firms appreciate that salaries have got out of kilter, and if they value you, in many cases they are open to a conversation in this market, rather than lose you and then have to hire someone.
The cost of then replacing that role and training somebody up, and the fee to maybe a recruiter and all those costs. It's better to keep those good lawyers rather than see them more.
So the advice is, if you're thinking of moving purely on pay, have a conversation with your existing employer first. And in
Yeah.
9 out of 10 cases, employers will have a constructive conversation, try and do something to keep you.
Or you will be counter-offered.
Yeah,
you will be counter-offered. So we don't want that. But yeah.
Declan, a quick question for you, because you've got a question in the chat box which says, or asks, any suggestions for US qualified senior lawyers who would like to enter the Dublin market?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends really on your practice area, I think, is a key one, because that's obviously going to kind of define, what you can maybe do. A big thing that actually just foreign qualified lawyers do in Ireland, which partners in Ireland really respect and appreciate, is that with the Law Society of Ireland, you can do certificates within different diplomas. You can get a diploma within a particular practice area. So sometimes if you're a commercial lawyer, it's a really good idea to sit the certificate of commercial contracts. And I think it's only like a 6-week or 8-week course. I don't know if I'm kind of correct there, but it's not a long grueling process, and it's not that expensive either. But essentially, it just shows the partners that you're actually kind of, again, vested in that kind of practice area. And whilst you might not be qualified in Ireland, you've at least done a diploma with the Law Society of Ireland, and you've kind of understood, you have some basic knowledge and understanding of Irish kind of regulations and kind of laws within that particular sector. So that would be a really good kind of stepping stone to do that. And then obviously, look, have a conversation, with myself. I think sometimes, depending on the PQE, depending on if their practice area is particularly, niche, if they've got like a particular kind of Achilles heel that a particular team needs at the moment within, a broader practice area, they're definitely kind of open to the conversation. So yeah, I've kind of placed lawyers from kind of America in firms in Ireland. I've also placed lawyers that are kind of Australian qualified. Obviously, if they're EU qualified, with the kind of EU member state, that's a lot easier. So there's definitely options. I wouldn't just kind of, sometimes I speak to lawyers, especially if they're Australian, or especially if they're even if they're an Irish returner, or if they're just someone who actually logistically is from that country and wants to make a move to Ireland. Sometimes they just assume that in-house is the only thing for them. Granted, it's probably going to be easier for you to get a role in-house because there's less kind of checks and things, obviously, but at the same time, firms won't close the doors off to you. Sometimes as well, you might not do like a fee earning role in practice. You might actually have like a professional support role. There could be a law of counsel role. You could be doing like an SME type role, a legal directorship type role where you're doing more business development. So you might not be doing like a fee earning role within a practice, but you can still work in a top tier practice, still have that big law energy, still kind of, have that kind of name and brand in your CV, but you're not doing like a client facing or a billable role initially. And then if you qualify, obviously you can lead yourself into that. So there's definitely different pathways and streams to go down in practice, whilst it probably is a little bit more trickier than moving in-house, and there are certain hurdles. To answer the question succinctly, I'd say definitely do the certificate in whatever practice area that you are within the Law Society. Reach out to me, we'll have a conversation about it. But in terms of practice area, you can definitely maybe be like, as I said, a PSL or an off counsel in your practice area, qualify with that firm, and then move in into a fee earning role. So there's definitely routes and paths to do that as well.
Oh, great advice. And Graham, just a question for you again from the chat box. I don't know whether this will be up your street, but the question is, what level of PQE is in most demand?
I'd need to delve into Atlas and see exactly who's been recruiting, but we see a lot sort of 2 to 6 PQE, so a lot of moves in that sort of area. Obviously NQs, we had them all on in September and March in England and Wales when they're admitted to the Law Society. So you then do tend to see sort of lawyers after a year looking to move on. One of the recruiters we work with, he'll focus on lawyers that have moved maybe a year ago, and we'll contact them and speak to them about how they're finding a new role. And the majority are happy with it, but there's a fair few that aren't, and always open to the conversation. But yeah, we tend to see, not really answering that question, but answering a question I can answer quite easily, that after about 2.5 years experience, you tend to see a big spike in lawyers moving.
Yeah, it's similar in Ireland. And even when I'm speaking to the heads of talent or HR, they automatically say, look, we really need someone at a 5-year PQE, but if they're 2-3 years, we'll get them in, we'll have a chat with them anyway, just given how tight the market is at the moment. So, and again, like post-COVID, that's become more of like an explorative conversation now, where initially it would have been, no, we need someone who's 4 years PQE, that's it. Don't get me wrong, there's sometimes that is the case, but in a general sense, I'd say 90% of the time, I'll reach out to them and say, look, they're 4 years PQE, you wanted 6, we have a chat with them and they'll say yes, 9 times out of 10, if they're from a good pedigree firm and if they have obviously all the credentials. So, but yeah, it's a similar in Ireland. Definitely, as I said, the unicorn is that 2 to 5 year piece, because they've either relocated or they're looking to move in house, or if they're moving practice, you know, they're kind of gold dust, to be honest. So I get excited when I get a CV at that level. It doesn't go on very often, but when it does, it's a good day. It's a good day in the office.
I think it varies on specialism and practice area and firm type as well. I mean, you see a lot of the bigger firms who are maybe, you know, in corporate M&A or finance, if they have a lot of lawyers between 5 and 9 PQE, all associates, all vying for partnership, and you know, in some of the London firms, 30 or 40 or 50 in a team, then they're not all going to make partner. And sometimes having conversations with those lawyers and explaining, or maybe showing them a different route to partnership with a firm that doesn't have 30 or 40 people vying for the same roles it can be quite beneficial. So you see a lot of movement around about 8 PQE.
Yeah, I think you're right. And my experience is most firms are still very, very top heavy. And certainly the firms I'm speaking with, they're very open-minded on PQE between that 2 to 6 level. And are really more focused on the individual, going back to what you were saying, Declan, in terms of, you know, are they passionate? Are they open to self-development? Will they have the ability to run case on their own and do BD? So they tend to look at perhaps the softer skills rather than purely the level of PQE. Just another question from the chat box from Jenny, and she's asked, what are some challenges you have faced recently in placing candidates?
This is for me, I would say, to be honest, it's just really tight at the moment. So when there's a lot of roles, like I have a lot of roles at the moment within certain practice areas, but it tends to be that there's multiple people at that level looking at the same time. So then when a role comes up, it's the similar kind of circles of people that are interviewing. So it's just quite tight at the moment. Like it's very much kind of, if you have like a 2 to 5 year PQE role at the moment, like anyone who's open to it will definitely have a conversation, or definitely kind of being open to partners, as I said, are kind of a bit more flexible and having a conversation. So instead, as maybe like a few years ago, again, maybe before the pandemic, it would have been very much like, no, we need someone within this particular practice area. We need someone from this particular type of, size tier firm. We need someone who's done this particular area within corporate. Now they'll be like, okay, well, look, we wanted someone who's 6 years PQE, they're 4 years PQE. We wanted someone from a top tier firm, it's a mid tier firm. We wanted someone, you know, who did like, you know, exclusively kind of just M&A transactions. They've done a little bit of that, but they've done more advisory. We'll get them in anyway and we'll have a chat. So whilst it's good in the sense that obviously firms are a bit more open to kind of who they're interviewing and who they're meeting, it's difficult in a sense as well, because it's hard to really understand, I think, what they need. Sometimes, you know, I'll have a call with the partners or have a call with the HR managers, and I'll say, like, what is the Achilles heel? Like, what is it that the team really needs here? Like, is it the PQE? Is it the technicality? Is it the BD piece? Is it lawyers who maybe have the better soft skills? They can meet with clients. Is it people who are just like focused and want to get the billables done? And they'll just say, to be honest, it's a mixture of both. So it's just, it's hard really to kind of understand. And like, it's the age, like sometimes when I'm getting feedback from HR managers or partners, you know, why would you be bringing this candidate forward for interview? Partners will just probably say, I'm just wasn't right. Just didn't get that kind of feeling. And again, that I think comes down a lot to them really knowing if you're kind of excited, not just on the practice area, but also on their practice. So I think, to answer the question, it's just, whilst it's great that partners are open to speaking to people at various levels of PQE, even though in their head they really want something, it usually takes a couple of interviews for me as a recruiter to maybe understand what it is that they're looking for, because they don't want to say no to anyone, because they appreciate how tight and volatile the market is. So any CV is a good CV for them to at least consider. And then when they interview people, they almost kind of have different people who have different skills, and it's trying to get the best of all the skills that they need, if that makes sense. So I would just say it's just tight at the moment, just really tight.
So what advice would you give law firms and organizations in terms of how can they attract the best performers and the best lawyers in your view?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the best thing to do is just be very kind of upfront with, because sometimes you read job specs and it's very kind of mundane, and it just kind of does, you know, the basics of what any kind of employment or what any litigator or what any kind of banking lawyer would do. But sometimes I kind of ask them, can they give me like a brief or like a blurb of the team structure, the average billables, what new clients they're bringing in, obviously they can't mention the clients' names, but the sectors of the clients that they work on. So sometimes when I'm having conversations with candidates, you know, I don't just send like a list of, you know, the kind of firms that are looking. I'll actually send them the partner profiles of usually the partners who usually conduct the first stage interviews, so they can kind of see the recent deals or the matters that they've worked on, because sometimes it's so hard for kind of lawyers to know which practice does which types of kind of law, what specialisms within like litigation, such a broad term, but like what do you actually want to do? Like what part of litigation do you want to focus on? So I think the best advice I can give is for law firms is probably just to kind of be quite upfront with the plans for the business and how the new people coming into their team can help that, whether it be if it's a particular type of kind of litigation that you need, if it's a particular, focus area or like niche specialism within corporate or within employment or within IP that you're looking for. Because again, have a conversation with a partner. Yeah, we need someone at this level of PQE. We need a corporate lawyer. Okay, great. And then I send them corporate lawyers and say, oh no, actually, we needed someone with more on the advisory piece. They're too transaction focused. Okay, well, we're happy to see them. We're happy to interview them, but that's not what we're looking for. So I think if they're kind of upfront on the job spec in terms of what like niche intricacies within a practice area they're looking for, that'll definitely help them attract the right people applying to the right jobs as well.
Yeah, you know what, I 100% agree with you, because I think there is a tendency, like you say, to almost fish in the market for the best people without really knowing what you need from within your team. And I think the other key attractor is having a clear understanding of what you can give the individuals that join the business from a self-development perspective. So I get lots of questions in terms of, what's the training, what's the development, what's the path to partnership, which types of clients I'll be working on, even names of clients. I think if you can give candidates as much of that information as possible, and they can see what the journey is. And I think candidates are almost looking for an experience in a way. Now, when they join them, I think if you can articulate 100%. That, then I think it makes it much easier to attract talent.
Path to progression is key, especially for someone who's at that kind of 5 and to maybe 10 years, who's maybe at associate looking to get to senior associate. Who's my competition? How many other senior associates are on the team? Is there, of the partners, how many partners are there on the team? How many partners are in certain subsets of that practice area? What's the billables going to be? Are you going to put more weight on people who come in or people who've trained with the firm? Like, because obviously different firms have different kind of focuses in different areas. But I have actually seen, to be fair, when I'm kind of meeting with clients recently, I have kind of asked, like, what is your L&D kind of process? Because I think it's been hard for kind of firms, again, before and kind of during COVID, to kind of offer genuine one-on-one learning and development, because especially on the NQ side, like as you said earlier, Graham, like you've got NQs who qualified, did seats remotely, like in 5 years ago,
they've never been in the office as well.
They've
learned from home, and they've not learned from osmosis, and there are other firms that they're not they've not got the experience, so they're looking to move at 2 years PQ because they've not learned, because they've not been in the office, and they want to be in an office, but some firms aren't offering that as an option.
They're not like sitting one-on-one with a partner and kind of even kind of raising their hand if they're free for kind of extra work and stuff. So I think the learning and development piece, especially on the NQ side, I think that's important, because I think maybe lawyers that have recently qualified have slightly unfortunately missed soft skills due to the kind of a lot of their training being remote. And we're getting firms that are kind of saying that to us at interview, that they're kind of missing. That's no fault of their own, obviously, and it's not just in the legal profession. Obviously, the whole world had to go through the pandemic. But I definitely think on an NQ scale, firms need to kind of really clearly show, as you were saying, Cassidy, like what experience they will have with the firm, not just on the billable side, but on the soft skills and the professional development piece that they'll get. And then on the senior side, when am I going to be partner? Like, what do I need to do to be partner? Because there's no point in me sitting here twiddling my thumb, like, kind of working, getting billables in, winning clients, and then I'm not going to get partner for another year. I'm not going to get partner for another 2 years. Like, what's the genuine partner track? So I just being really upfront about that. And I think obviously they can't be upfront about that, on websites, but definitely at interview. Like, I had a senior associate interview with the firm a few weeks ago, and I said, look, ask all those questions, because if I was in your situation, I'd want to know. I said, look, at the partner, they were in your situation a few years ago, like they would be asking the same questions as well. And then unfortunately the partner just, we're not at liberty to say, and it really kind of put obviously bitter taste in the candidate's mouth, because then they're like, well, if they're not at liberty to say, how am I going to make a decision? So I think just being open to sharing that information with someone who's obviously interested in your firm, and sharing as much information as you can, as well at interview, I think, and kind of being upfront and honest with candidates during the whole process.
Yeah, it's transparency, and I think that is important, the good and the bad, and people will then trust you in terms of joining us as a business. And Graham, I know you're sort of not a recruiter in terms of your role, but what do you see as some of the challenges that firms are facing from the conversations you have?
I mean, what you've touched on, just how hard it is to find good candidates. The good candidates that you find then are being counter offered and staying in the current roles. Lawyers being very risk averse, and we're coming up to Christmas, and and trying to move now, and with what's going on in the economy and globally, and is now a good time? Is now a good time to move, or should I leave it till January? You've got all those sorts of issues. You've got firms, some of the smaller firms that are maybe struggling with the personal indemnity insurance, and looking at being acquired or looking at merging with other firms. We've seen a lot of M&A activity this year, and likely to be a lot more in the early part of next year as well. There's a lot happening. But the alternative law firm market has probably been one of the biggest things that we've seen this year. And the report that we put out there, it says within about 3 years, we think about 25% of lawyers will be working for working as consultants, working for a platform law firm. So,
wow.
So yeah, it's quite a big thing, and how traditional law firms will fight back to try and keep that talent rather than losing the talent to these new firms.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Graham, and it's interesting. I've had a number of conversations with managing partners over the last 12 months who are really interested in acquiring other firms. So there's no doubt the M&A will continue, and I think this whole economy of scales piece, I think particularly at partner level, and in the regions, people are struggling to get their billable hours at the fee levels they're targeted to achieve. And I think this is where the challenger firms have been really successful, just undercutting, haven't they, those regional firms, but providing an equally high quality of lawyer. Therefore, they've been able to acquire some really good clients. So it'll be interesting over the next 12 months to see, particularly as I suppose clients are going to be more conservative around what they're spending, whether that will continue to drive the trend.
Yeah,
but there's been a few issues with firms like Metamorph and Ince, and it's been well documented in the press, how maybe they're not as, but they're struggling. Firms like that, some firms like that are struggling. They've grown very quickly. Metamorph have acquired a number of firms, and it's been difficult to grow. And then with COVID and paying for officers that lawyers aren't using, it all adds into the mix. So there's a number of different things being played out at the moment.
I think as well, like for the merger stuff, it's definitely a benefit to the candidates. Like when I'm speaking to candidates, some candidates are a bit daunted by the new internationals. This is for obviously for Dublin. They're like, oh, well, what's the BD tool? Like, what will I be expected to do? Like outside the billables, like I'm only kind of 3 years PQE. Like it's going to be great exposure, but am I going to kind of sink before I can swim? Whereas the likes of Adishar Goddard that have come in and kind of acquired Eugene F. Collins, which was kind of seen as like a mid to top tier in some practice areas firm in Dublin, acquired it, and that's an easier sell as a recruiter. It's an easier kind of conversation for candidates to have, because obviously they've got the benefit of having long-standing kind of individuals who were at Eugene F. Collins before Adishar Goddard acquired them. They've got the resources, they've got the clients, they've got the structures there, coupled now with the international brand of Adishar Goddard. So they've got like that benefit of kind of working on kind of, again, Irish council kind of transactions in the UK or kind of globally. So that's an easier sell instead of someone who's maybe in an Irish firm at the moment and wants that international exposure, but is a bit daunted by what that actually might look like for them in terms of like a BD perspective. And is it kind of, are they growing too fast? What's going to happen? Or kind of is it a bit more of a risk rather than kind of like the long-standing indigenous firms in Ireland that have been around for 150 years or whatever. So it's an easier sell, I think. So I definitely think from a business perspective, if possible, obviously it's a big consideration, it's a big cost, but it's definitely a good idea. And Adishar Goddard, like speaking to HR recruitment in there a few weeks ago, and it's been really well received. And again, it's a firm that candidates, when I speak to them, are really interested in, because it's quite a different kind of niche to talk about. So I definitely think that's, and as just to echo what you're saying, Graham, like we're seeing the same in Dublin. Alternative legal solutions like Johnson Hannah, like recently they've kind of established themselves. They're just doing completely cost effective, kind of inexpensive kind of cost solutions that are a lot more faster. Again, lawyers that maybe were in the commercial technology or within the corporate technology space and practice, instead of kind of making a move completely into in-house, it's kind of this like in-between stage that they can kind of go into, and kind of it's this new kind of, I suppose, kind of glamorous sort of route to kind of still having the best of kind of both worlds in terms of obviously maybe having a bit more work-life balance, but still doing really good, high caliber work and working with the top clients in the market. So yeah, it's definitely on the rise. And again, like even on the kind of consultancy space, like kind of working with the likes of kind of EY, KPMG, they actually have fee earning kind of lawyers in Dublin now at the moment. So they're not, the in-house counsel, obviously they have teams in-house to kind of focus on whatever happens obviously internally, but they actually have fee earning kind of billable lawyers. I know a couple of them personally from college, and they're enjoying it because they kind of have the benefit of doing fee earning billable work, having that client one-to-one interaction and having that exposure and technically being kind of challenged, but they're sometimes maybe not asked to kind of do the billables that a top five or an international firm would warrant. So and the pay isn't that different. So it's definitely kind of a good balancing act to have. So that's a really interesting quote though, Graham, about the alternative legal solutions.
I mean, touching on that, there's firms like the Legal Director in the UK seem to be growing very quickly and offering services to SMEs. Yeah. SMEs who can't afford their own in-house counsel, but they're working with people like them and Obelisk Support who are then putting in a legal team for 6-12 months or in addition to a team that they maybe already have if they're struggling with workload. So that's another route that the lawyers can look at rather than going to traditional or alternative law firms. Yeah. Look at those that provide services to SMEs.
Yeah. A lot of options.
And just switching the question a little bit to candidates. So what advice should we be offering candidates to I guess get ahead in today's market? Are there any common things that we should be touching on and advising candidates on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just being quite, I mean, obviously we can help with that, Cassidy, right? That's our job as consultants, is to kind of provide advice to them. But I think it's just being very kind of focused on what's the why. Do you know, like, I think sometimes when I'm speaking to kind of partners or HR managers, they talk about like, the what, like, what can you provide? What experience have you had? What, PQE do you have? What kind of clients have you worked with? But why are you looking to move? Like, what is actually the driving motivator? Like, what is the kind of factor that actually is making you kind of consider your options? So having a really robust answer for that, because it's the kind of $1 million question at an interview, and sometimes candidates actually, before I would obviously prep them, but before they think, oh, I actually don't know. So then it's for me then to kind of ask, okay, but why, until you get to the kind of nitty gritty. Because I think sometimes only when you kind of actually ask yourself the question as to why I'm actually sitting in front of this partner, or why I'm sitting in front of this legal director having this conversation, will you kind of be able to kind of obviously answer it? Because again, it comes up at interview all the time. And again, if you don't have a robust enough answer for it, it's game over. And I think as well, maybe just going back to our kind of previous conversation, as you were saying, kind of, Graham, like, don't be afraid if deep, like, it's your career, like, deep down that you're not enjoying the work, not because of the hours, not because of the challenge, not because of the clients of the firm, but when you sit down at your desk, the actual practice area that you're working on, it just isn't of interest to you. It's okay. It doesn't matter what PQE you are. Lawyers change all the time, and firms, and I speak. It's obviously when I'm having conversations, when I'm kind of selling in a CV at that stage. Obviously, it's a bit more of a sell as to why they're looking to move practice area. Sometimes HR managers and partners say, you know what, that's fair enough, and partners respect it, because it's better to kind of have someone who's thought about it, had the exposure, had the experience, and now really has the drive to change practice area, rather than someone who's just looking to move for the sake of it, and then is another 2 years going to look to make another move. Do you know what I mean? Because it's actually not the law, it's the practice area that they're not enjoying, if that makes sense. So yeah, I suppose just having a really clear cut as to why you're looking to move, both professionally and personally, and then if you're not happy in your practice area, having a conversation with us and exploring options in the market. Because sometimes as well, like, I'm speaking to candidates, like if I speak to a commercial property candidate, I was speaking to one a few weeks ago, 3 years PQE. I was like, well, in commercial property, you're dealing with a corporate team, you're dealing with the tax team, you're dealing with an energy team 9 times out of 10. Like, the move isn't as big as you think, and sometimes I think lawyers think, oh, I'm a real estate lawyer and that's it. And it's like, well, no, you can move. You can make a lateral move into a different practice area. And if it's of interest to you, then the sooner the better. So partners are a lot more kind of malleable and kind of flexible to that. For sure.
Declan, do you advise on LinkedIn profiles at all? So we having mapped so many lawyers in the UK that 15% don't have LinkedIn profiles, which I can understand in some areas, and maybe somebody who's 30, 40 plus PQE and LinkedIn was kind of before that time before. But what about, lawyers coming through? I mean, is it important to have a really good LinkedIn profile with details of projects that you've worked on or deals that you've worked on? So a lot of lawyers don't update their LinkedIn profiles, even lower PQE ones.
I know that's a great question, Graham, because sometimes I actually speak to candidates and they'll just have the firm and then associate, and I'm like, what do you do? So then I'm recently, are you open to a job? And they say, yeah, and I have to go, sorry, I was asked this, but from your kind of, you're not on the firm's website. I can't see you on the website. From your LinkedIn, you just say you're an associate. What is your actual practice area? So I think you're right. Like, even having like maybe kind of some of the main transactional deals that they've worked on, or just kind of really highlighting, I suppose, what they've done to date and making that kind of really, really clear as well. If you're like an NQ, maybe just having like the seats that you did. Again, for me, that's a lot easier for me to know as a recruiter, or for partners even to reach out, or HR managers of other kind of recruitment companies, or sorry, law firms to reach out, because if you have the seats, then obviously 9 times out of 10, if you've done a seat, if you're qualified into an area that's not for you, if you've done a seat in it for 6 months, firms will have a conversation with you about it, but if you don't have that information on your LinkedIn, you're probably going to miss the boat. So yeah, definitely
we see so many LinkedIn profiles that are very, very little data. And I can understand maybe lawyers not keen on being inundated by recruiters. But then, it is a competitive market when it comes to looking for that next role. Having a good LinkedIn profile with details of who you link to and deals that you've worked on
can
help your future career.
Yeah, it'll attract the right. That's what I mean. It'll attract the right recruiter, because sometimes you're kind of stabbing in the dark and hoping someone will come back. But if I have a candidate profile that I know clearly matches a job spec or matches a conversation I've had with a partner in a firm, I'm like, I've got the perfect job for you. Like, let's talk, sort of thing. So yeah, definitely, I would agree with that. You tend to kind of find it more though on the junior end, which kind of does make sense. But yeah, definitely a robust LinkedIn profile, I think it would be key, because the partners do look at them. I've had a few candidates who are interviewing and they say, yeah, I noticed so and so looked at my LinkedIn, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be the case. So
I think you guys make a great point, but I think on the other hand, a large proportion of the legal recruitment we do is not done off of LinkedIn. So the benefit of being LinkedIn, we're headhunting people, we're being proactive, and lawyers are often operating in their own network, which is distinct from LinkedIn, because corporate lawyers know corporate lawyers, they know the partners. So often they do know each other without using LinkedIn as a tool. And I think that's why legal recruitment is often quite different potentially to IT recruitment and other areas, because it is such a personal, networky type of recruitment still, but I'm sure that will evolve.
It's not just recruitment though, it's for BD as well, isn't it? You look at a commercial lawyer, or you look at the profiles, LinkedIn profiles of those working at alternative law firms. They're because they're self-employed, really. Their LinkedIn is very important for them to generate new business, and that's probably the same for big law firms as well. They can generate new business by having a very good LinkedIn profile.
Yeah,
that is a good point. But I think also, we're just sort of following on from that whole sort of networking theme. A great way to get a role without putting ourselves out of a job is for candidates to approach those firms they're really interested in themselves and their own network. So be proactive in your job search. I think that particularly works well where perhaps you are, a corporate lawyer and you wanted to become an employment lawyer. Your skills are a bit quirky. Reach out to those organisations, whether it's in-house or practice, that appeal to you, and you'd be amazed how these personal connections can result in a role, if not now, then in the future. So I think my advice to lawyers at all levels, particularly junior level, is it's about your network, and obviously LinkedIn is a part of that. But I think also that's going to face-to-face networking events, it's picking up the phone, it's having visibility in all sorts of different spaces to get ahead of your career.
Yeah, I always ask the question as well, like, have you, obviously when talking to them about a firm, have you ever worked against them or worked alongside them? Like, have you ever worked on a transaction or on a matter, with them? Because again, that is going to help at the interview to kind of, obviously you're working on the same deal, the same transaction, you can clearly do the work on the other side. So, definitely kind of talk about that at an interview. They'll probably know from the CV, but sometimes lawyers are like, oh, should I say that? I'm like, oh, absolutely say that. Like, that's key. And I think just it is quite a nepotistic market, especially in Ireland. Like, just to kind of, before we finish off, I had a candidate around, I think it was last week, and I said, going through the firms, and anyway, and they were definitely looking to move for whatever reason. And I said, okay, what about this firm? They said, no, my boyfriend works there. I was like, okay, what about this firm? I was like, no, I have an ex that works there. I was like, okay, what about this firm? I was like, I have a cousin that works there. So it's just, I think in Ireland you've got the kind of smaller market as well, that kind of, everyone knows kind of everyone in the Irish market because it is smaller. But just to echo what you said, Cassidy, like, I think if you are working on a deal, on a transaction, or working on a matter, and you notice a partner kind of CC'd in on the email, and you look them up and you see that they're, impressive, or they've got a really good, like, Legal 500 Chambers, UK, or 500 kind of rating, reach out. Like, if anything, it's going to benefit them, especially, as I said, they're always happy these days to have an explorative conversation. If not now, then definitely for the future. So, and use us too.
Question for you, Graham, Declan, I guess all of us, in terms of then, obviously, we're hearing the sort of mention the R word, but what are your views on where the market's going to go over the next 6 to 12 months? Do you want to go for that, Graham, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it varies in certain parts of the UK. So I think in the London market, about 48% of lawyers are in London anyway. So I think that's quite different to other regions, but we don't see any slowdown at the moment. So, I mean, Christmas is coming, it's the end of the year. Will lawyers want to move at the moment? Yeah, not sure. When we go into next year, a lot depends on the residential real estate market. I mean, that tends to drive everything else over here. And, you know, if there are problems there, but then you might see a knock-on effect from that. But you know, with stamp duty, you know, being reduced, or the you know, not having to pay stamp duty, and it's still, yeah, I mean, it's still positive. So yeah, for the next 6 months, probably not going to see any change, but there are recruiters and there are firms looking for more insolvency and restructuring lawyers, and that points in one direction. So, but yeah, I think that the more people talk about recession and how bad things are, I think the more self-fulfilling prophecy it becomes. So I'm not going to talk about
it. Oh. I think if law firms were recruiting during a global pandemic, I think we'll be okay. We were still keeping busy across most practice areas in Dublin anyway during a global pandemic when we couldn't leave the house. So I mean, hopefully we'll be okay. But yeah, just to echo what Graham said, I am having conversations, you know, especially on the ComLit side with insolvency, kind of yeah, the debt recovery kind of based lawyers for sure. That's always been a big need anyway in Ireland, definitely kind of obviously since the crash, but more so in the recent months. But then on the other foot though, I mean, kind of tech had a bit of a wobble a few months ago. A few lawyers were like, oh, not sure if we're going to kind of recruit in our data protection or tech industry. Now they're like, oh no, we need people again. So it ebbs and flows, I think, with different practice areas. But yeah, I think it'll be okay. I think practice, will always be busy. I just think, as you said earlier as well, Graham and Cassidy, like there always will be a need for lawyers, you know, no matter what the market is. Sometimes for better reasons than others. But yeah, I definitely think that we should hopefully stay stable. Fingers crossed anyway.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think we're busier than ever, aren't we? So, which is encouraging. So we haven't seen really any slowdown in any sector as yet. So I think where law firms are diversified, I think we're still in pretty good shape for the coming months.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's about it. Is it anything else you wanted to add, Graham or Cassidy, or and then
I think we've covered everything there. Yeah, it's been very informative session.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, look, thank you so much for everyone that's joined this evening. I appreciate it's kind of gone past 7 o'clock. So thank you for obviously sharing your insights as well, Graham. Some really great stats and figures there for us all to kind of go away and think about. And we're going to do another launch poll now. So we'd love for you to obviously leave us some feedback. It'd be great for us to kind of understand when we do kind of future, I suppose, events, what you might be looking for, how else we can kind of engage and inspire our community. It's something at Broadgate we're really passionate about. So feel free to give your feedback as honest as possible. And obviously, if you have any ideas, we're always open to ideas about future topics or how else, what other themes that you want to know about within the legal market, because I appreciate this was quite a broad overview. So next time we want to make it quite thematic and focused. And then for those that wish to continue the discussion further with me and Cassidy and Graham, please feel free to join our networking session. And there's going to be a link, I think, that's going to be posted into the chat. So feel free to jump on that as well. But look, thank you so much for attending today. And Graham, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
And yeah. Thanks so much. Have a lovely evening all.
Thanks, guys.